Welcome to Assembly Revenue. Madam Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Present. Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. Here. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Here. Assemblywoman Considine. Present. Assemblyman Hafen. Here. Assemblywoman Kasama. Here. Assemblyman Miller. Present. Assemblyman O'Neill. Here. Assemblyman Ortlicker. Here. Assemblyman Roberts. Here. Assemblyman Yeager. Here. Chair Cohen.
And I am here, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and dispense with the normal housekeeping. I think we all know it by now. And we're going to go into our work session. So, Mr. Nakamoto, if you'll please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I am Michael Nakamoto, Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Nevada Legislative Council Bureau. The first bill on today's work session is Senate Bill 284, which was sponsored by Senator Ratty and which was heard in this committee last Thursday on May 6th. Senate Bill 284 in its first reprint revises various provisions governing the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program that was established pursuant to Senate Bill 448 of the 2019 legislative session as a 4-year pilot program that is administered by the Housing Division of the Department of Business and Industry.
Okay, we're going to do the work session first.
Specifically, the bill does 4 things. First, it revises the procedure for the issuance of transferable tax credits so that transferable tax credits are issued before rather than after the project is completed. Second, it authorizes an entity to which a project sponsor transfers transferable tax credits to transfer those tax credits to one or more affiliates or subsidiaries and requires the entity to notify the Housing Division of such a transfer. Third, it removes the 4-year sunset provisions originally established by SB 448 from the 2019 session, thereby making the program permanent. And finally, it clarifies that the maximum amount of tax credits that may be issued under the program remains at $40 million as established in SB 448. There were no amendments to the bill. Madam Chair, members of the committee, if there are any questions, I would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nakamoto. We also have Mr. Acroft from the from the Nevada Housing Division on the Zoom. If anyone has any questions, the senator is still chairing right now, so she was unable to come to the room, but we do have availability for answering questions if anyone has any. Okay, seeing none, I will take a motion to do pass. Okay, I have a motion from Assemblywoman Considine. Do I have a second? I have a second from Assemblyman Yeager. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I am going to take a vote without doing roll call, but because the room is so big, I just need to make sure that if you are a no, please make sure that I got you. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. So that was unanimous. And I will assign the floor statement to Assemblywoman Considine. Thank you, sir. Welcome. And with that, Mr. Nakamoto, if you'll please go on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division. The second and final bill on today's work session is Senate Bill 395, which was sponsored by Senator Goycochea and which was heard in this committee also last Thursday, May 6th. Senate Bill 395 provides that if approved by the voters, the Board of County Commissioners of a county whose population is less than 45,000, which are Churchill, Esmeralda, Eureka, Humboldt, Lander, Lincoln, Mineral, Nye, Pershing, Story, and White Pine counties, shall levy a tax of not more than 25 cents on each $100 of assessed valuation of taxable property within the county for the capital projects of the school district. The bill provides that the rate established pursuant to the bill must not be included in the total ad valorem tax levy for the purposes of the application of the limitation in NRS 361.453, which provides that the total ad valorem tax levy for all public purposes must not exceed $3.64 on each $100 of assessed valuation. Additionally, the bill specifies that the amount of any tax imposed pursuant to the bill is exempt from the provisions of current law, which generally limit annual increases in property taxes to between 3% and 8%. Again, there were no amendments to this bill. Madam Chair and members of the committee, if there are any questions, I would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nakamoto. And as the committee members can see, we also have Senator Gogachia in attendance. Do we have any questions? Is that, no, okay. Assemblywoman Kasama, please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to state that I'll be voting yes out of committee, but reserve right for the floor, so.
Thank you. And as a reminder, you always have the right to change your mind before something gets to the floor, but we just ask that you let me know if you are changing your mind. Do we have any questions? Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thanks so much. I can say that I guess I feel sympathetic towards this bill because I was in this such situation, right? I was a co-sponsor on a bill like this that failed once and came back, and co-sponsored a bill a second time to do something similar in my county. So I've been sitting in that seat where you at the local level are trying to flesh out how you address your capital needs in education. And education funding is really tricky, right? Everything goes into these really defined buckets. And at the end of the day, that ability to meet your capital need, it can be very hard, despite all the money that floats around in education, to say, I've got money for brick and mortar. So I do have an appreciation for this. I imagine all the conversations that happened, and I know that the bill sponsors coming kind of in a hat in hand way to say this is the only thing I know how to do to help. So I'll be voting yes for this because I've been there. I don't necessarily know what my colleagues are going to do, but I've had this feeling of trying to beg a group of people to hear me out about capital needs in my district. So,
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And why I haven't been in the exact same position. I am very ditto to what my colleague said. I feel your pain, so happy to support.
Okay, do we have any questions? Okay, I will take a motion to do pass. I have a motion from the Vice Chair. I have a second from Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Do we have any discussion? Go ahead, Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you. And I agree with both the prior speakers as well who talked about the importance of coming in hat in hand, asking for this. But I also have to be realist, and I will be supporting it. I want to make sure that's clear beforehand. I also think it's up to the voters to make that decision. And I get frustrated, though, because I'm looking at these counties. I'm looking at everything that I'm being told that they're receiving from a outside group who does not want to put more money into our different school districts for whatever reason, and it gives me pause. And I've already spoken with I've emailed the maker of the bill my concern. At the same time, I do believe that it is an argument for the voters to have to listen to, and it is up to the voters to make that decision. But I am concerned about how there's an outside entity away from the school district who is saying how much they're giving to education and to other local industries and public works, and it's not always coming out in the school buildings themselves. So just wanted to make sure that that was on the record, and thank you, Chair, for that time.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay, so for nay, I have O'Neill, Considine, Roberts. Am I missing anyone? Nope. Okay, the motion passes, and I will assign the floor statement to Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Okay, and with that, we will close out our work session and move into our presentation on the Economic Forum. So gentlemen, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Russell Ginden, Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division. And so what you have is a couple tables, and what I will bring up is the one table to try and use for the presentation here.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ginden, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, and so I don't know if BPS can take care of that, or
Is this any better?
no.
This is Cindy with Broadcast. We are having your volume turned up, sir. Mr. Ginnen, if you can go ahead and test your audio again.
Okay, is that any better? Hold on here. Okay, so is hopefully that's better.
But yes, that's better. Thank you. And I will remind the committee, we do have large versions of the charts on our desks.
Okay. And so what I have brought up here, and sorry, I'm trying to figure out where to put the Zoom box so I can actually see the numbers myself. So you have two sets of tables, as the chair pointed out. The one that is landscape mode and has the yellow box in the upper right hand that says Economic Forum May 4th, 2021 forecast. That's what we generally refer to as that's the forum's general fund revenue forecast table. So that documents every general fund revenue source that's unrestricted general fund revenue source that the Economic Forum prepares a forecast for FY21, the current fiscal year that we're in, obviously. FY 2022 and FY 2023, the two fiscal years for the next biennium for which the legislature is developing a budget. And so you have that table. All of you got an email after the Economic Forum was done with the letter that the forum sends out along with that table, as well as the table that I have up on the screen, which is the one that I wanted to go through informational wise for the presentation. And so I don't plan on going into great detail on this, more to probably allow the members to how to read the table and then hit the highlights. And so what you see here in the top block of this table is the Economic Forum's May 4th, 2021 forecast. And it's just worth pointing out that under the statute, the Economic Forum is statutorily required to prepare this forecast on or before May 1st. Unless May 1st falls on a weekend or a holiday, and then they can have 2 business days after that weekend. So thus they prepared the forecast on Tuesday, May 4th, complying with the statutory provisions. So this is their May 4th forecast. And so what I've done in this summary table is we just show you what we call the 7 major general fund revenue sources that the forum actually at the meeting listens to the forecast prepared by the agency that collects the revenue, by economists from the budget office, and then Joe Rio, Michael Nakamoto, and myself prepare forecasts for some of these other majors. So those majors are the sales tax, the gaming percentage fee tax, the live entertainment tax, which has the 2 components, the commerce tax, the modified business tax, which has the 3 components, the insurance premium tax, and the real property transfer tax. So you can see this FY 2020 column is actual. That's the actual collections for that fiscal year since it's known. And so just to give you an idea, this $3.394 billion, these numbers here are in millions of dollars. That's approximately about 83% of the total general fund revenue in FY 2020. So these 7 majors outside of fiscal years affected by pandemics account for somewhere in that 83 to 84% of total general fund revenue. So when moving to FY21, what you have is the forecast here that was prepared for, this is the state 2% sales tax. So remember, like the sales tax rate, that the minimum statewide rate is 6.85%. But the state general fund rate is the 2% rate of that rate. And so in May 4th here of 2021, the Economic Forum, based on the forecasts that were presented to it for their consideration, approved the forecast here of approximately $1.242 billion for FY21. You can see back here, the middle block of the table is their December 3rd, 2020 forecast. And so at that point in time, based on the information that was available and the assumptions that forecasters were utilizing to prepare their forecast, they approved a forecast of approximately 1.179 billion. So then I'll scroll here just to go through. Then the bottom block is showing you the difference from the May forecast to the December forecast. So that May 4th forecast for sales tax is approximately $63.8 million higher than it was in their December forecast for FY 2021. So that's basically reading the table. So as you go across here, then obviously the form is required to prepare the forecast for the current fiscal year and then each fiscal year of the next biennium. And then for the help, we've rolled a table together here by the current biennium, which is the 2019-21 biennium, and then the 21-23 biennium, and then all three fiscal years together. So that we can then, as you're looking at the May forecast compared to December, to get an idea of how much revenue is for each biennium, and then over the three fiscal years in terms of the net change in revenue between the May and December forecast. So going down here then, I think, right, what's probably the more important elements, and probably all of you have seen the newspaper articles or had a chance to look at this table when it was emailed to you, that for FY21, you can see that the May forecast for total general fund revenue sources was approximately $323.5 million higher than the December forecast. And you can see the ones that the sales tax, the gaming percentage fee tax was the highest upward revision, as well as the commerce tax and the modified business tax were contributing to those upward revisions for FY 2021. Then moving over to FY 2022, then you can see the upward revision here to the sales tax is approximately $95.4 million in 2022, and actually almost $102 million in FY 23. Then again, you can see the percentage fee forecast was revised up by approximately $42 million and $44 million respectively for FY 22 and FY 23. And then again, the modified business tax adding approximately $56 to $63 million over each of those 2 years. So again, allow you to look through where some of the other changes are. But the bottom line, when you come down to the bottom of the table here, that the May forecast is approximately $281.7 million higher than the December forecast for total state unrestricted general fund revenues. And then coming over to FY23, the May forecast is approximately $304.5 million higher than the December forecast. So for the 29-21 biennium, you see again the $323.5 million as the difference. And these are the same, again, why? Because FY 2020 was actual. So when you're forecasting the 2019-20 biennium or the current biennium for which the legislature is actually in session, it's the current year's forecast that is driving the results because the actual is known as a number. So that's the $323.5 million that you're picking up in FY21. And you may ask, well, does that matter given that we're almost at the end of FY21? And the answer is yes. That $323.5 million is additional general fund revenue that is available for consideration by the legislature here in the 21 session. And so that it can be appropriated, it can be saved and put in a rainy day fund. It can be left in such that it would carry down into the ending fund balance that would be carried forward into the FY 2022 beginning fund balance. And so those are the mechanics of this is that it does matter. That when the form is adding this revenue in early May, and you're thinking, well, we only have like less than 30 days left in the session, it does matter. It matters in terms of the budget dynamics that are going on in the legislature. So then moving over to the 21-23 column, you can see that you're adding both the 281.7 million and the 304.5 million to get this $586.2 million in additional unrestricted general fund revenue that the Economic Forum forecast for May compared to the December forecast. And so total for the 3 years then is what you've seen in the paper, heard about, is the approximately $910 million, $909.7 million in over the 3 years in additional unrestricted general fund revenue that is available for the legislature's consideration here with less than 18 days left in the session here, or whatever it is. And so with that, Madam Chair, I think that was the information that I wanted to get out there, which is sort of what the information is in the table, how you can read it, and then what the bottom line results are. And with that, knowing everyone's busy, I will end my presentation, and I can answer any questions that the members of the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ginden, especially knowing how busy you and the staff have been. We really appreciate this. Okay, do I have any questions? Okay, Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair, for the time. Mr. Ginden, I know this was probably done in the forum. I just want to confirm what I'm thinking. On their forecasts, with what the Supreme Court ruling just came out today on the commerce tax credits against the MBT, will those numbers change at all in that line for their May forecasts? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and that's it's a difficult question to answer. So what I'll first start with is, given the ruling, that and staff is working through that. They'll first have to make adjustments to the FY22 and FY23 forecast for the modified business tax for the lower rates that will have to come into play based on the Supreme Court's ruling. And then there will be the refund issue for the taxes that were paid at those higher rates for FY 2020 and FY 21. So I just need that as someone to get out there that's the MBT. So then the commerce tax credits, which is specific to your question, the commerce tax credits come as that you're allowed to take up to 50% of the preceding fiscal year's commerce tax as a credit against your MBT. So the answer to your question could be is, well, depending on how much commerce tax you actually end up paying for each one of these fiscal years that's being forecast by a business, and then in relation to the modified business tax, is that yes, the commerce tax credits could be affected, but it's going to be very hard to determine that, because what the dynamics are is that if somebody paid the modified business tax at the higher rate, and then they were supposed to pay it at the lower rate, but you can only take up to 50% of your commerce tax but you can't exceed your MBT liability, that's going to potentially affect the dynamics of your commerce tax credits that you could take at the lower MBT rate, both in the real world for people, what taxes they actually would have paid in FY 2020 and FY 2021 to date. And for us as forecasters, it's hard to figure out that dynamic, but your logic is correct that the commerce tax credits, both actually and forecast, could be impacted by the Supreme Court's decision that the lower MBT rates now come back in and become effective.
Follow up, Chair, please. So to put it simply, do you think it will have a dramatic effect on that final number, or just an effect? That's what I'm trying to figure out, if how big of an impact it may have, if you could just take a guess at that for us.
I believe it will be a relatively small effect in terms of the impact on the commerce tax credits against MBT. The larger effect is going to come from the MBT expected collections for FY22 and FY23 because of the lower rates coming back into effect for FY22 and FY23 versus the impact on the commerce tax credits against MBT.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you for the time, Chair.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify on the chart we have here. Excuse me, it says percent fees, the second line down, percent fees, gross revenue before tax credit. Is that mainly the mining tax in there? Or what is,
No, I
what is
apologize.
in that?
Yeah, I apologize. For the record, Russell Ginnam with the Fiscal Analysis Division. That is the gaming percentage fee tax, and I apologize. It's just to try and keep everything on a page. So, Assemblywoman, that would be as if you look at the landscape table, it would be under the gaming-state section of the first page of that table. You see percent fees - gross revenue. So we're using the same labeling. It's just unfortunate to get everything on the page. You're losing that gaming-state reference, but you can see then that's what that is. That is the monthly tax that non-restricted gaming locations pay on their monthly gaming revenue from their gambling activities that occur at their establishment.
I
So
see.
it is nothing to do with the mining, it's to do with the gaming tax.
Right, I see the labels there now on the other one. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, did I? Okay. Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Mr. Ginnan, just had a question on the percentage tax for gaming. Obviously, the May projections are substantially higher than the December projections, and I was pretty surprised, I think, to see the latest gaming numbers. I think it was from March or April, I can't remember, but they were very, very high compared to what it's been. And so in looking at those numbers, it looks to me like we're not really projecting that if we use 2018 as a baseline of normal, so to speak, that we're not really going to get back to normal on the gaming percentage really projected until 2023, maybe 2022 into 2023. And I just wondered if you could give some context for that forecast, because it seems to me, based on the last couple of months and what I've seen in the McCarran Airport, that Vegas is ready to explode in a huge way. And so I just wondered if there was just some caution there based on international travel, or what it was that sort of caused us to think it's going to still take a couple of years to get back to where we were on the gaming percentage.
Yes, thank you again for the record, Russell Ginnam with the Fiscal Analysis Division. Those are good observations. I think the one point that we're pointing out is that after the Great Recession, prior to the pandemic, you can see FY 2019 being the high. FY 2018 was 757.8 million. Then it actually fell in FY 2019. We never got back to the peak pre-Great Recession. So the gaming tax, if you look at it, it's on average, but it moves more sideways than it does up. So when you see the growth that we have, yes, you're correct. The collections from March 21 business activity were record-setting. And I mean that literally, in terms of you have to go back decades to see some of that type of activity on the slot side and the total actual tax collections. But you have to be careful not allowing 1 month to be the signal for the remainder of the future. So the forecasters, I think, realized that things based on the information set back in December versus knowing where we're at with the vaccination occurring. Remember, March had the additional stimulus checks coming out. It appears they might have been very beneficial to the economic activity that occurred in the state in general, let alone in Clark County and the gaming community. So as the growth that we have there, I think it sees that you're going to come back. I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind for gaming is that it's still very dependent upon visitors. And so when the forecasters are thinking about this, is that you still have vaccinations to occur in the US, but also in the international community for those visitors to be restored to the market, but also the ability to bring back midweek type of activity, your convention, trade show stuff. And so the expectation is that will take a little bit longer to fully get in place. And so that's why you do see by FY 2023 that you're getting numbers that are back up above the FY 2018, FY 2019 peak. But that's more, it's going to take a year or so possibly to maybe get all that fully functionally back in place, where we can have the midweek convention trade shows like we did pre-pandemic. You can have the international visitors coming back. And in a sense, restore all of the visitor dynamic to that the Las Vegas gaming market, but also in some sense to the northern gaming market. Although the northern gaming market was much less impacted here in the last 6-7 months. They've been up compared to a year ago versus being down. But again, because of the visitor dynamic is much different, I believe, in the Lake Tahoe, Northern Nevada market versus the Clark County market. And so hopefully as someone that was a semi-appropriate response to your question.
Thank you. You got a head shake. So yes, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so I wanted to know, does housing have a effect on this, or where does our housing market kind of impact this if it does?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Russell Gannon, Fiscal Analysis Division. Remember, you're asking an economist that type of question, so I will try and answer the best I can, because directly, housing would come into the real property transfer tax, that when houses are sold, then that would trigger the real property transfer tax to attach to the sales of those residential property. And so that would be, in a sense, that the direct tax that would be on the housing. So the indirect parts are housing is a part of the economy in terms of people are allocating a portion of their wages or income to housing. So the more that they would have to allocate to housing, then perhaps the less disposable income there is for participating in economic activity that could be related to the gaming taxes, the sales taxes, the live entertainment taxes, and things like that. So that's the economist answer, which is, yes, it has some direct effects in terms of the housing and the sale housing and the prices of the sales of those homes. But then the indirect effect can be that, well, what does that mean for the portion of a person's budget that has to be allocated to housing to then have the other portion of their budget that's not being allocated to saving or can be allocated to economic activity to which our other taxes would attach.
Okay, so I guess it's almost like a chicken and the egg thing. So you provide the information and you forecast with the real property transfer tax, but you don't look at that and then have that affect any of the other numbers that you're not kind of predicting based on that, except for the real property transfer tax. Correct?
Yeah, and there's some, but as an economist and an economist who makes up numbers for a living, you're all of that is, in a sense, attempting to be taken into account. So when we're preparing our employment forecasts and our wages forecasts and our personal income forecast, and then out of that comes, well, then you have the wages and income that can be used to buy tangible personal property to which the sales tax attaches. You could go to a casino and spend some of it there. You could go out to eat, to which the sales tax. So you're simultaneously trying to think about, yes, people are going to be moving here, trying to regain jobs or getting jobs, and then that will, as they're buying homes, that will affect the real property transfer tax. But as they're doing other things outside of that housing decision, whether renting or buying, that's affecting the wages or income that are available to be allocated to the others. So can I directly point at the forecast and tell you that portion of the forecast is that portion related to thinking about the housing portion of the market? No, but it is in the forecaster's mind when you're thinking about the economic dynamics that are going on with people earning wages and income and then going to allocate that to housing and non-housing type decisions in their budget. And I know that's probably no clearer answer than my first answer to you, but that's probably the best I'm going to be able to give you as an economist.
No, I think it does answer it, because you're not just looking at everything that's on the chart. You're considering other issues and financial issues that are going on in communities, I guess. So
Yes, the crystal ball has many snowflakes in it. So.
okay, do we have any other questions? Vice Chair.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask Mr. Ginden if there was anything of note that you wanted to keep in mind, or anything that you saw that might be an interesting trend or emerging trends. I know that during the pandemic, we saw things happening in certain types of columns on numbers that we didn't expect. For example, I think it was we saw a large number of sales. I think it was the sales tax coming in on cars and people buying cars, and we didn't necessarily expect that. So the people were acting in ways that we didn't always expect. Is there anything that we could take from these numbers that are of note in terms of trends or things that might be counterintuitive?
Again, for the record, Russell Ginden with the Fiscal Analysis Division. That's a very good question. Talking about trends trying to come out of a pandemic is a very difficult thing, because I'll be honest with you, as an economist, when March 2020 happened, that was a very phenomenal event, both in all facets. But as an economist, economically, to have something like that occur, where supply curves have to be taken out of the economy and thus demand, in a sense, along with it. And then we've slowly been seeing that come back. And then I think we watch that, and then we see where the federal stimulus programs are out there helping business, helping citizens, attempting to help state and local governments. How and when does that money get in there? Because clearly when we've been seeing the monthly or for the quarterly taxes numbers as they've come in, you can clearly go see that. And I believe that's what you're going to see. You saw in the March gaming numbers, was the stimulus money was helping. I believe probably when taxation next week releases the March taxable sales numbers, you're probably going to see some very phenomenal numbers there. So what I would, the way I would answer your question, Assemblywoman, is we have to be careful as we see these numbers come out each month to not possibly go, oh my gosh, that is great, and that's our new trend. To step back and evaluate what might have been in there driving the number. Was that the month stimulus checks come out? Is that, and so to try and just temper as you're looking at each month or quarter's numbers that they come out, to step back and evaluate the number in the context of what was also out there. And thus, right, we're still waiting to get the full guidance from the U.S. Treasury on the additional money that the state will get and the local governments will get, and then, right, for elected officials to decide how to use that, then that's what we'll have to watch. As that money starts to get into the economy, what will that mean for economic activity and the taxes that we have attached to that? I think one of the things that we were waiting to see is, like I talked about, the midweek coming back and that, but you go look at the live entertainment tax here, it's not that major of a general fund revenue source, even pre-pandemic, around 130 million. But if you go look at the forecasts for that, it's clearly just been one of the taxes in the industrial sector tied to the tax that's been devastated in this pandemic. And so to start to see that come back, and we are starting to see some concerts being listed and sold out almost immediately in the Las Vegas area. So those are the things I think we're looking at, is to see things like entertainment and some of the other types of economic activity come back, and to then see what does that mean for the numbers that get reported for those taxes. So I know that's not probably the best answer to your question, but that's what we're looking for as we see each month's numbers getting released. As economists, what we try and look at is what's the signal in the numbers and what's the noise. And be careful not to read the noise as signal when you're looking at those numbers.
I appreciate that. That's really helpful, because I know that, especially, I think the first thing half of us did, I imagine, at the bottom of March was call you and what are we seeing and what's happening? And it was a lot of, we don't know yet. And there's a lag between when we collect our, when people spend, and then when the taxes are remitted, and depending on what kind of tax, it's a different remittance schedule. So sometimes we're looking monthly, sometimes we're looking quarterly, and such like that. So it's a little bit looking forward and a little bit looking back. And thank you for reminding me not to see the noise. So when I see numbers coming in really good for 1 month and start to try to spend it all, I should temper myself.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for well, I really appreciate all of this information. Not gonna lie to you, I'll probably be giving you guys a call when it's a little bit calmer, but I think that might be a little bit later. I've got two questions. The first is based upon the question earlier from Chair Cohen when it came to 3055, the real property transfer tax. I know that that's not necessarily exactly related to her question, but just wondering if that is something just to be aware of, if that is kind of connected to that answer that you gave earlier when it came to real estate, or if that is a completely different thing and I am misunderstanding that distinction. And then I'll have a second question that's not related to the real property if Chair Cohen would like me to ask that later.
Again, for the record, Russell, again, I apologize. I'm not sure I follow the question there with regards to the real property transfer tax.
Could you just expand upon what that entails, and if that is a positive trend, if that's something that we should just continue to keep our eye on, or just a little bit more information about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all seeing what's going on with the housing markets and possibly the housing prices. And so that's when you see the forecast that were put together there, that we have it basically staying in around that $122 to $125 million range over the 3 years, but having it falling back slightly in FY 2023, just because of thinking that what's going on with the housing prices, and hopefully supply will start to come back in terms of the building. But it is the tax that is related, and it's not only the sale of residential property, right? It could be non-residential and commercial property that sells, that triggers the real property transfer tax. But I think when you look at that, where we knew the information almost through the first 3 quarters of FY21, when we were doing the forecast for FY21. So that $124 million that you see forecast there is probably a pretty solid number, although actual still could come in below or above that forecast because we still wait to collect the last quarter. But then I think it's not unreasonable to think what's going on, that the sales of residential property and the prices of those are going to continue to be somewhat good. But then yet probably the prices will fall back some in FY 2023 would be the assumptions that are lying behind those revenue sources. So I don't know if that answered your question, and if not, please let me know and I can attempt to do better.
No, you were able to understand my very befuddled and confused question. So thank you very much for clarifying that information. And then my second question, if I may, Chair Cohen. Thank you. Again, remember that I'm incredibly confused by some of this stuff at times. I didn't see anything that had to do with the marijuana tax. I don't know is that a decision that the Economic Forum does not utilize, or is that possibly used in other areas? And maybe it is there and I just didn't see it.
No, you're not seeing it correctly so, because both of the 15% wholesale marijuana excise tax and the 10% retail marijuana tax, they are not unrestricted general fund revenue sources. Thus, under the statutory provisions for the Economic Forum, they are not required to prepare a forecast for either of those marijuana excise taxes. So that's why you don't see them on the sheets. But there were forecasts prepared for both of those revenue sources, and they are prepared through by your staff, the text team, as well as the economists from the budget office. And then we interact to come up with a consensus forecast. And we had a meeting between staff from the Department of Taxation and staff from the CCB, the Cannabis Compliance Board. And so I just wanted to get that out there, that there are forecasts being prepared for the excise taxes on marijuana, but they are not required to be done by the Economic Forum. But staff from the Budget Office and Fiscal Analysis Division have developed a process where we do our independent forecasts and then get together and come up with a consensus. That was done back in the fall for the consensus forecast that was then used by the governor in the executive budget. And then we did that for a revised consensus forecast that will be used as a forecast for the FY21 and FY22 and FY23 that will be used for the legislatively approved budget.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Chair Cohen, for that time.
Vice Chair?
So I'm going to beg the question, tell us more then. What do those forecasts look like? I know that when we were first trying to stand up the marijuana program, the best you all could do was, I think, look at weed maps. So now that we've come a little bit further into this, I guess, tell us more about those projections.
Yes, I don't have the actual numbers. I can see if I can try and pull them up here while I'm talking. Let's just say that apparently people were dealing with the pandemic through cannabis with THC in it. Because I think it began somewhat like the early last summer that we started seeing the 10% excise tax generating around $7 million a month, possibly on average. And so that was a significant jump in when you chart this and look at it. And so our expectation was as well, is that sort of like, yeah, people trying to get through the pandemic by utilizing marijuana. And so our concern was it a transitory type thing, or was this sort of some kind of permanent shift? And the marijuana program was there, it's fully developed, or it's still developing, but it's much more, it's starting to mature, and the level of supply and demand is larger than what it was. And so when we went and looked at that, the trend that's one where I can use the trend, that the level of tax being generated by the 10% retail tax has held up. And so, and thus corresponding with that, we see the 15% wholesale tax doing better than what we probably would have originally thought when the pandemic first had its effects back in March, April, and May. And so the forecasts for both the 10% and the 15% here in May were also, well, the 15% was revised up more than the 10% in the May forecast compared to the December forecast. So when we did our December forecast, we had those months where it had shifted up to a new level. And so the forecasters were incorporating that it's not just a transitory thing. It seems to be some kind of semi-permanent or permanent shift in the demand and consumption of marijuana products. But we were missing on the 15% wholesale side. And so hopefully that answers your question, that we have seen those two revenue sources shift up in the pandemic and been able to sustain sort of those types of levels for consumption. And so to give you an idea, I was able to pull it up. So for FY21, we're thinking the 10% retail excise tax will be around 86 million, and then go up to approximately $90 million in FY 2022 and approximately $95 million in FY 2023. Whereas the 15% wholesale X tax is forecast to be somewhere around $64 million for FY 21, $65.5 million in FY 2022, and $69 million in FY 2023. So it's it's getting close to that mid $95 million range by the end of the forecast is the expectation based on the analysis done by each of the independent forecasters and the consensus that was arrived at between budget and fiscal. So hopefully, Assemblywoman, that answers your question on the marijuana taxes.
Yep, she's nodding. Okay, any other questions? Okay, Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you for that. And it sort of occurred to me when you were mentioning how people dealt with the pandemic. And where am I finding liquor sales, alcohol sales on this? Where, on what page? Page 3? Thank you.
It'll be on page 3.
Thank you. Everyone knew except me. Thank you.
So it's on page 3 of the table, the landscape one under other taxes, second one down, GL 3050. And again, that's the tax, not the sales. So remember, the tax is composed of 4 different components with different rates on those components: beer, liquor, from 0 to 14%, 14% to 22%, and then over 22%. And those percents are alcohol by volume. So you can see the tax collections there, that it actually did go down. And I think that was expected in the pandemic, just again, because, right, when you take the visitors away from down south where we have the $35 million visitors coming in, and they're no longer coming in at those numbers, then our expectation was that things like cigarettes, other tobacco, marijuana, and liquor would potentially go down. And some of them did. Some of them held up better, I think, than when we were looking at this back in the March, April, May, June, July period of FY 20, calendar 2020. And then start monitoring them, and some of them were impacted as we expected. Others weren't possibly expected as much. Another one of the things that was hard for us to figure out is that cigarettes seem to hold up better than we would have thought, taking all the visitors or a large portion of the visitors out of the state. And so liquor did get affected, but what you can do is, liquor is a tough one, again, as an economist, because The beer category in coal it's technically, we call it beer, but it's malt beverages and beer. So, right, you see all these seltzers and these malt type beverages coming out. So sales could, the tax collections could stay flat on that or go down as people are shifting their consumption patterns, right? If you quit drinking beer and start drinking the seltzers, you haven't changed the tax base at all. And then if you move from beer to wine, then you're moving into a category with a higher tax rate, and hard liquor has the highest tax rate. So some of them, that's why this can be a hard one when you're looking at the tax collections. As an analyst, we have to go in and look at all those four components, and we actually do get the gallons for each of those four components. So we can try and monitor what's going on with the gallons to see what's going on in general, let alone in a pandemic.
Thank you for that. And that's very interesting. I'm wondering, and maybe I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure I know the answer. So since alcohol has the four different categories, does marijuana too, like are edibles taxed differently than flower or vaping or whatever? Or are they all the same category?
There are different categories of those in terms of the types of marijuana and marijuana products, but the tax rate is 10%. The retail tax is 10% of the value of the retail sale of that taxable marijuana product. So even though there's different types with different levels of THC and the edibles versus the bud that you can smoke, and we just tax 10% of the retail value. Then the 15% wholesale, clearly you have the plant, you have the pre-rolls, you can have what's called trim. So there are different product lines at the wholesale level, also at the cultivation level, but it's actually, the tax is 15% of the fair market value of those. And so the tax rates are the one tax rate for all the different types of products at both the wholesale and the retail level.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Sorry, I just saw something interesting. So we did during the special session, we went ahead and authorized the tax amnesty program. And I see that our 2021 forecast actuals, it looks like we brought in about $1.5 million. Is that, I want to say we thought that would perform a lot better, but am I missing something? Is there something I should be thinking about, or did we really only get 1.5 from that?
No, actually, again, for the record, Russell Union with the Fiscal Analysis Division. I'm probably missing something, Assemblywoman, in not actually going to that one.
I'm sorry, the tax amnesty?
Yeah, and so I didn't go through that, and I should have, so I will here. And I'm getting feedback on my end. I didn't know because there's a microphone on or not. So the tax amnesty, Assemblywoman, thank you for bringing that up, because that is actually, I should have pointed it out on my own, and I did not. So in the July 2020 special session, yes, the legislature authorized the Department of Taxation to do the tax amnesty program for 90 days. They ran that program from February 1st to April 30th. And that reminds me, I need to ask taxation to update what they think the actual amounts are. But when we were preparing the forecast to take forward to the Technical Advisory Committee to the Economic Forum, the last week of April, the Department of Taxation, based on the information they had at that point in time, year to date on the program, that the actual collections for the general fund taxes was approximately $3.5 million. So, but back in the July 2020 special session, based on the information we had available and the analysis done by staff from the Budget Office, Fiscal Analysis Division, and Department of Taxation, our estimated value for that tax amnesty program for the 90 days was $14 million for the general fund portion. So what we know then, as I stated, that at that last week of April, the actual collections were $3.5 million. What based on the additional information taxation was able to talk through with staff, that our expectation is probably the total amount would be 5 million, not the 14 million that we were expecting during the special session. So for us to be able to account for it on the economic form sheets, since the forecast was revised from 14 to 5, but we know the 3.5 is actual, then the forecast is 1.5 million. Because the $3.5 million in actual, it's getting deposited with the tax, whether it's sales tax, live entertainment tax, liquor tax, any of the taxes that a taxpayer would have made payments under the amnesty program, they then get distributed as actual collections. So those actual collections are built into the actual year-to-date collections, and thus they're built into the forecast. So then the 1.5, Assemblywoman, is the revised estimate for the remainder of the amnesty program for FY 2021. So it's the $3.5 million actual and the $1.5 million forecast here gets you to the $5 million forecast. So you're going from a $14 million forecast to a $5 million forecast. So it was less than what we thought. But it's not going from $14 million to $1.5 million. It's going from $14 million to $5 million for the general fund portion of the amnesty program.
Okay, thank you. I think we don't have any more questions, but thank you. We appreciate it. And so with that, unless there was anything else you wanted us to know, Mr. Gundin, I think we will move on. Thank you. We'll move on to public comment. Seeing no one in the room for public comment, and I don't believe there's anyone on the Zoom for public comment. If we could go to the phones, please.
Yes, Chair. Callers wishing to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. With the caller with the last three digits, 486, slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, good evening. Alexander Marks, MARKS with the Nevada State Education Association. Today is day 102 of the legislative session, and we are still waiting on a public discussion of mining taxes and serious contemplation of generating revenue needed by public education and other important services in Nevada. With just 2 weeks left, it's past time to open a public hearing on AJR 1. K-12 public education has been woefully underfunded for decades, ranking 48th among states in per pupil funding. Nevada also has the largest student-to-teacher ratio in the country. Currently being considered is $156 million in cuts to class size reduction over the next biennium. This will mean a loss of about 1,000 teachers, if not more, across the state, meaning even more students packed in Nevada's overcrowded classrooms. Also being considered is a $33 million cut to early literacy supports in the Read by Grade 3 program. Last session, Senate Bill 543, the new school funding plan, created the Commission on School Funding and charged it with recommending funding targets and identifying revenues to fully fund the associated cost. Last month, the Commission published their preliminary recommendations, and while NSCA opposed Senate Bill 543, we largely agree with the Commission's funding targets. The Commission proposed to reach, quote, adequate funding by increasing education investment by $2 billion over the next 10 years. That's $400 million each biennium starting this session. That's why NSCA believes AJR 1, passed in a 30-second special session, would be a strong start to meeting that goal. AJR 1 would generate $485 million in new revenue for Nevada annually. It's the right-sized response to this session to the revenue challenges we face. We've all heard there's been conversations about a possible deal, but no one seems to know any of the parameters. It is time to open up that conversation. Please schedule a hearing on AJR 1 for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person for public comment, please.
Yes, with the caller with the last 3 digits, 358, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hi there. My name is Selena LaRue Hatch, L-A space R-U-E H-A-T-C-H. I'm a teacher and member of NSCA and WEA, and I am also calling upon this committee to pass AJR 1 so that we can have a full open discussion on this measure. It is so long overdue and clearly popular with Nevadans, as evidenced by the thousands of emails, hundreds of protesters, hours of public comment, and overwhelming polling results you have all received since its introduction last summer. And of course it is popular. The mines in Nevada make a fortune from our resources while paying a pittance in taxes to support the state that makes those profits possible. It is time that they start paying their fair share in this state, just like the rest of us. We have been through a time of crisis which has demanded sacrifice from our healthcare workers, our educators, and our essential workers. All we are asking is that the mines share in this sacrifice, that they share a minuscule portion of their record profits in order to fund the vital community services of education and healthcare. It is bewildering why a group which voted for this last special session is unwilling to do so again. And I would like to echo the previous caller that we are told continually that a deal is being made on mining. But why is it that no educators are invited to speak on this deal? No doctors are invited to speak on this deal. No ordinary citizen. It is only the mining lobby which is allowed to come in and get a special deal. And it is incredibly frustrating that citizens like myself have to somehow donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to a political campaign in order to be part of this process. For a body which has stressed democracy so hard with your increasing voting rights bills, it makes no sense why you wouldn't trust democracy again and put this on the ballot and let Nevadans have a say and let Nevadans vote. Thank you.
Next person for public comment, please.
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no more callers at this time.
Thank you. Okay. So committee, I don't think we're going to have anything tomorrow, but I have put out an agenda just in case. So just, stick around and we'll give you a call and ask you to come in if we do need to have you come in. Committee, any comments? Anything? Nope. Okay. Seeing none, we are adjourned.